There's a photograph from the early 1960s that tells you everything you need to know about why pharmaceutical companies tried to suppress Jack LaLanne's approach to health. In this photo, Jack is standing in his kitchen. He's holding a large glass filled with green liquid. Fresh vegetables are spread across the counter. A juicer is visible in the background. And he's smiling. Not just smiling, but radiating health and vitality at an age when most men were already experiencing decline. This photograph, and thousands like it, represented an existential threat to the pharmaceutical industry. Because Jack LaLanne was demonstrating every single morning on national television that you could prevent disease, maintain extraordinary health, and live decades longer without medication. This is the story of the juice that Big Pharma tried to ban. And more importantly, it's the story of why nutritional approaches to health have been systematically marginalized for over 70 years. Let's start with what was actually in Jack LaLanne's famous morning juice. The recipe varied slightly over the years, but the core formula remained consistent. Fresh vegetables, primarily dark leafy greens like spinach and kale, celery, carrots, beets, fresh fruits, apples, sometimes citrus. And occasionally, he'd add specific ingredients based on seasonal availability or specific health goals. The process was simple. He'd juice these fresh ingredients every morning. No pasteurization, no preservation, no processing. Just fresh, raw vegetable and fruit juice consumed immediately after preparation. The entire glass would contain the concentrated nutrients from pounds of fresh produce. Now, here's what made this threatening to pharmaceutical companies. This juice contained compounds that research would eventually prove have profound effects on human health. Antioxidants that combat oxidative stress, phytonutrients that reduce inflammation, vitamins and minerals in forms that the body can easily absorb, enzymes that support digestion and cellular function, natural compounds that support cardiovascular health, immune function, and cellular repair. In other words, this juice was doing what medications are supposed to do, but it was doing it through food, not pharmaceuticals. And that's a problem for an industry that makes its money selling drugs. Let's talk about the timing of when pharmaceutical opposition to nutritional medicine really began. In the 1950s and early 1960s, the pharmaceutical industry was experiencing explosive growth. New drugs were being developed. Antibiotics had proven that medicine could cure previously fatal diseases. The industry was riding high on scientific credibility and public trust. And then Jack LaLanne shows up on television every morning, telling millions of people that they can prevent disease by eating vegetables and exercising. Not by taking medication, by eating food and moving their bodies. To understand why this was threatening, you need to understand the pharmaceutical business model. Pharmaceutical companies make money from sick people who need medication. The more people who are sick, the more medication gets sold, the more profit the industry makes. This isn't conspiracy. This is just basic business economics. Now, what happens if people stop getting sick? What happens if nutritional approaches prevent the diseases that would otherwise require medication? The market shrinks. Profits decline. The entire business model is threatened. Jack LaLanne's juice, and more broadly, his entire approach to health through nutrition and exercise, represented exactly this threat. He was demonstrating that many of the diseases that require medication, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, even some forms of cancer, could be prevented through lifestyle and nutrition. And if people believed this and acted on it, pharmaceutical sales would decline. So the industry responded the way threatened industries always respond. They worked to marginalize the threat. The mechanisms they used were subtle but effective. First, they promoted a narrative that nutrition is secondary to pharmaceutical intervention. The idea was embedded in medical education that while diet matters, it's not really medicine. Real medicine is drugs. Food is just food. It might help around the margins, but it's not treatment. This narrative was incredibly effective because it positioned pharmaceutical interventions as serious, scientific medicine, and nutritional approaches as alternative or complementary, not primary treatment. Second, they funded research that downplayed nutritional interventions. If you look at medical research funding from the 1960s through the 1990s, pharmaceutical companies funded enormous amounts of research on drugs, while nutritional research received comparatively little funding. This created a body of literature that was heavily biased toward pharmaceutical interventions simply because that's where the research money went. Third, they worked to make nutritional claims legally restricted. By the 1970s and 1980s, regulations were put in place that made it difficult to make health claims about food or supplements. You could make claims about drugs. They were regulated but allowed. But making claims about food or natural compounds, that was restricted. The effect was to create a legal environment where pharmaceutical companies could market their products for health benefits, but food producers largely couldn't. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, they worked to separate nutrition from medicine in medical education. If you look at medical school curricula from the 1960s through today, nutrition education is minimal. Most doctors receive less than 20 hours of nutrition education in their entire medical training. They receive hundreds of hours on pharmacology. The result is doctors who graduate believing that medication is how you treat disease, and nutrition is a nice idea, but not really medical intervention. All of these mechanisms worked together to create an environment where LaLanne's approach, prevent disease through nutrition and exercise, was marginalized as interesting but not serious medicine. But here's what the pharmaceutical industry couldn't suppress. Results. People who followed LaLanne's approach, who drank fresh vegetable juice daily, who ate whole foods, who exercised consistently, they got healthier. They didn't develop the diseases that their peers developed. They didn't need the medications that their peers needed. And over time, word spread. By the 1980s and 1990s, research started to catch up with what LaLanne had been demonstrating for decades. Studies showed that diets high in vegetables and fruits reduced cardiovascular disease risk. Studies showed that specific compounds in vegetables had anti-inflammatory effects. Studies showed that nutritional interventions could manage or even reverse certain chronic diseases. The science was validating what Jack had been saying all along. Food is medicine. But even as the science accumulated, the pharmaceutical industry narrative remained dominant. Doctors still prescribed medications first and suggested dietary changes as an afterthought. Medical education still emphasized pharmacology over nutrition. The system was built around pharmaceutical intervention, and it was resistant to change. Let's talk about specific compounds in LaLanne's juice and what we now know about them. Dark, leafy greens contain compounds called glucosinolates, which research shows have anti-cancer properties. Beets contain nitrates that the body converts to nitric oxide, which improves cardiovascular function and blood pressure. Carrots contain beta-carotene and other carotenoids that support immune function and reduce inflammation. Celery contains compounds that research suggests can lower blood pressure and reduce inflammation. Apples contain quercetin and other flavonoids that have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects. When you juice these ingredients together, you're creating a concentrated source of these beneficial compounds. You're delivering to your body, in one glass, nutrients that most people don't get in a week. And here's the critical piece. These compounds work synergistically. They don't work in isolation the way pharmaceutical drugs do. They work together, supporting multiple biological systems simultaneously. This is why nutritional interventions often produce benefits that pharmaceutical interventions don't, because they're addressing the underlying systems, not just individual symptoms. Jack LaLanne understood this intuitively, decades before the research proved it. He understood that the human body is designed to extract nutrients from food, and when you provide those nutrients in concentrated, bioavailable forms, the body responds by becoming healthier. Now, let's talk about his results. Jack drank this juice every morning for over 70 years, and for 70 years he didn't develop the chronic diseases that most people develop. No cardiovascular disease, no diabetes, no cancer, no metabolic syndrome. At 96, when he died, his body was remarkably free of the diseases that typically come with aging. Was this all because of the juice? Of course not. It was his entire lifestyle. Exercise, whole food nutrition, stress management, sleep. But the juice was a cornerstone of his nutritional approach. It ensured that every single day, regardless of what else he ate, he was getting concentrated nutrients from fresh produce. And here's what's particularly important. This wasn't expensive. Fresh vegetables and fruits are relatively inexpensive, especially compared to medication. The juicer is a one-time cost. The time investment is maybe 10-15 minutes per day. For that modest investment, you're getting nutritional support that pharmaceutical companies can't replicate in a pill. This is why the pharmaceutical industry worked so hard to marginalize nutritional medicine. Not because it doesn't work, but because it works too well, it's too accessible, and it threatens their business model. Now, in recent years, there's been a resurgence of interest in nutritional approaches to health. Functional medicine, which emphasizes nutrition and lifestyle as primary interventions, is growing. Research into nutritional compounds and their health effects is expanding. More people are understanding that food is, in fact, medicine. But the pharmaceutical industry is still fighting against this. They're still funding research that emphasizes pharmaceutical interventions. They're still training doctors who learn pharmacology but not nutrition. They're still marketing their products as the primary solution to health problems. The difference now is that people have more access to information. They can see research directly. They can follow practitioners who emphasize nutrition. They can experiment with nutritional approaches themselves and see the results. Jack LaLanne's juice is no longer a secret that the industry can suppress. The recipe is public. The science supporting it is public. The results people get from following similar approaches are visible. Let me give you the actual recipe. This is based on Jack LaLanne's various demonstrations and interviews over the years. It's not exact. He varied it based on what was available in his specific goals. But this captures the core formula. 4 to 5 stalks of celery, 1 large handful of dark leafy greens, spinach, kale, or chard, 2 to 3 carrots, 1 small beet, 1-2 apples, optional, small piece of ginger, half a lemon, juice everything together. Drink immediately. Do this every morning. That's it. That's the juice that the pharmaceutical industry tried to suppress. Simple, accessible, effective. But here's what's important to understand. This juice isn't magic. It's not going to cure existing disease on its own. What it does is provide your body with concentrated nutrients that support every biological system. Over time, consistently, this nutritional support allows your body to function optimally. It reduces inflammation. It supports immune function. It provides antioxidants that combat cellular damage. It delivers minerals and vitamins in bioavailable forms. Combined with other healthy lifestyle factors, exercise, stress management, good sleep, this juice becomes part of a comprehensive approach to health that prevents disease rather than treating it after it develops. And that's the real threat to the pharmaceutical industry. Not that juice cures disease, but that comprehensive nutritional and lifestyle approaches prevent disease. Because if disease is prevented, medications aren't needed. And if medications aren't needed, pharmaceutical profits decline. The industry will continue to promote the narrative that medication is primary and nutrition is secondary. They'll continue to fund medical education that emphasizes pharmacology. They'll continue to market their products as solutions. That's their business model, and they'll protect it. But you now know what Jack LaLanne proved over 70 years. That simple, consistent nutritional practices, like drinking fresh vegetable juice every morning, can support extraordinary health and prevent the diseases that most people accept as inevitable. The pharmaceutical industry tried to suppress this truth. They tried to marginalize nutrition as medicine. They tried to keep people focused on drugs rather than food. But the truth, like fresh vegetable juice, is something you can make in your own kitchen. And once you know it, no industry can take it away from you. Now, if this documentary revealed how Big Pharma systematically suppressed nutritional approaches to protect their profits, hit that like button. This message needs to reach people who are taking medications for conditions that might be prevented through nutrition. And if you want to see the rest of this series, we're exposing more suppressed truths about Jack LaLanne's methods. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment below. Do you currently take any medications for chronic conditions? Have you ever tried nutritional approaches before resorting to pharmaceuticals? What's your experience been? I read every comment and I want to hear your perspective on this. If you know someone who's on multiple medications for preventable conditions, someone who's never considered that nutrition could be primary medicine, or someone who trusts pharmaceutical solutions without questioning alternatives, share this video with them. Show them the recipe, encourage them to try it for 30 days and see what happens. You could literally change the trajectory of their health. The next video reveals why Jack LaLanne's wife finally spoke out about the one thing he never told the public, the secret practice that even his closest followers didn't know about. It's more personal and more powerful than anything we've covered so far. Link in the description and card appearing now. Big Pharma spent billions trying to convince you that food isn't medicine, but you can prove them wrong in your own kitchen starting tomorrow morning.